Hey there, it's Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and welcome to my January 2025 forecast for all 12 signs. Now, before I start to go through each sign individually, I will cover the global predictions and key themes that I see coming up. And so you want to stick around for that. But I do have chapters below if you want to jump to a specific place. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to look ahead at the month of January together. And again, cover it from many different angles and it will be a thorough, comprehensive review of the month ahead. So before I start, though, if you want to get a comprehensive look at the entire year of 2025, I would highly recommend that you download my 2025 horoscopes. Over 8,000 of you have downloaded a video so far, and I really do appreciate all of your support. Now, those videos are 75 to 90 minutes each per sign, and it includes professional production, much more high quality than what you're seeing now. In terms of the actual camera, the audio. Also, it includes visuals of each new and full moon with the key aspects listed, retrograde dates, ingresses, all the major transits and trends as it applies to each sign, a custom monthly ranking of the significance of each month for each sign, and so on. So I really do appreciate, again, everyone who's downloaded a video so far. Definitely not too late to download one now. Each video is 20 bucks and it's 20% off if you download more than one, if you download it before the new year. So if you're watching this YouTube video in January, you can still get the videos and they're $20 each, however, without the discount. So anyways, let's dive right in. So the month of January. Well, let's just actually review how we got here first. So in November, when I was looking at the month of December, I predicted that December would ignite this crusading energy due to the Sagittarius new moon that was conjunct Antares. And that perspectives on the healthcare industry would also be changing. And weeks later, Luigi Mangione wrote a manifesto about the healthcare industry and is now the prime suspect in the shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Now, regardless of your personal feelings about the incident, it certainly sparked a nationwide conversation about the healthcare industry. And I also do have an analysis. I have an analysis of Luigi's chart on my social platforms like Instagram. And I also did an even deeper dive into his draconic chart on my podcast, Astrology Unbound. So I also discussed in December how borders would be changing and political rhetoric continued to focus on, well, immigration, as well as whether it's plausible or implausible, the potential acquisition by the United States of Greenland. So obviously that probably won't actually happen, but there is a discussion about boundaries and borders and immigration. Another thing I discussed, I predicted that the airline industry would be reeling from difficulties, and we had the drones hovering in New York and New Jersey, leading to a temporary shutdown of certain runways. Also, there was a plane crash in Kazakhstan and a body found in the wheel well of a flight from Chicago to Maui. So definitely the airline industry didn't necessarily suffer from, exorbitant delays, but there were crashes and there were some bizarre events in that space. But I think what's interesting too is that I predicted that Trump would have travel difficulties in December. And in fact, the drone issue in New Jersey led him to cancel a flight to New Jersey. So in a lot of ways, in many ways, those predictions for December ended up manifesting. And also, I discussed how major legal battles would emerge, and we did have that with, whether it be TikTok or the Blake Lively case. Otherwise, though, December was quite a sleepy month, and many people grappled with fatigue, lethargy, and potential health issues, whether personally or within their families. And some people went into hermit mode or stopped communicating with people due to the Mercury Saturn square. But January definitely changes the energy. And so I'm going to discuss that today. So let's start off for January by discussing the dominant transits. So number one, Mars continues to oppose Pluto. That is a major, major transit that I want to focus on. And pardon me, I just have to quickly adjust my screen here. So yeah, the Mars-Pluto opposition is very fierce, it's ferocious, it's tenacious, and it's a little bit frightening, just to be honest with you. I mean, Mars opposite Pluto is like a head-to-head battle. In some cases, it can sort of inspire people, though, to, you know, stand up for the underdog or whatnot. But in a lot of cases, it does lead to kind of like vengeful sort of thought processes and activities. And it can make people sort of hover around these sort of resentful feelings and bitter feelings, and the bitter feelings can fester in really problematic ways. So I'm not a big fan of the Mars retrograde opposite Pluto. And this really activates the charts for any of you with major placements in the first decan of the fixed signs. So 0 to 9 degrees of Pisces, or sorry, not Pisces, Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. So, this could be, this could include, disputes within friend groups or disputes over, well, competition for validation within groups or within, creative groups. There's a lot of different ways that that can play out. But I just wanted to mention that the Mars-Pluto opposition is taking effect, and I'll talk about the key dates for all of these things in a bit. But that Mars-Pluto opposition definitely, again, sort of almost allows this very vengeful energy to fester. Then there's also a Sun-Mars opposition this month, marking the peak of, the Mars retrograde cycle. And the Sun-Mars opposition can really, bring this Mars retrograde frustration or exhaustion or enervation to a head, meaning that people feel highly frustrated, but also highly drained and maybe a little bit off the ideal path in terms of stress management. But that does precipitate, solutions, I think. Now we also have a Mercury Mars Chiron T square this month, which is very argumentative and very conflict prone, and kind of creates a very volatile rhetoric, and even some transportation activity can become almost dangerous with that. If you look at the charts of people with Mars opposite Mercury, which is one of the rarest aspects in astrology, they can be very accident prone. They can have all kinds of issues, broken wrists, broken arms, or, head injuries, vehicular accidents, bicycle accidents, motorcycle accidents. And with the square to Chiron, it does feel like there's some kind of rhetoric that gets so vitriolic that it inflames the wrong people at the wrong time. So I'll talk about the key dates for that transit, but you'll definitely want to avoid combative people during those times. The Sun and Pluto are aligning in the sign of Aquarius, which is really marking a new era of executive leadership, even a new perspective on our goals and like where we want to kind of take this Pluto in Aquarius era. So there's almost like a new generation of leaders that are starting to emerge, but also new kind of like heavy-handed approaches potentially to social media because it's happening in Aquarius. We also have a Venus-Saturn conjunction happening this month, which I'll take you through the key dates as well. And that could, really help encourage like really long-term committed relationships, especially in the creative space. And also, though, there are some potential like splits, high-profile divorces, breakups, and for some people, just a feeling of being distant from others. But I do think that with Venus being exalted in Pisces, this could be a very beautiful conjunction. However, keep in mind that Venus will eventually retrograde in Pisces and form another conjunction with Saturn in April. So even if you like, just the takeaway there is that even if you decide you'd like to commit to someone for the long haul, you might revisit that in April. But again, in my 2025 horoscopes, I already give you all this information. And even if you wanted to stick around for each monthly YouTube video and sort of, not download the horoscopes, I mean, that's fine. But like, you're watching this video just a few days before January or in January. So it's like these videos are helpful, obviously, but it's not going to be as helpful as getting like a detailed and a cohesive, comprehensive perspective of the entire year. So anyways, now let's go through the key ingresses. We have Venus entering Pisces. Again, it's exaltation January 2nd. Meaning, by the way, that Venus will not be really in Aquarius at all this year, just because of the retrograde in Aries and Pisces. Mars will enter Cancer again on its retrograde path on January 6th, interestingly creating a square to the January 6th, 2021 Mars at 29 Aries. So you have to wonder If there's something with Jan 6 that is being regurgitated 4 years later with the Jan 6, whatever you want to call it, the riots, Mercury enters Capricorn, bringing on January 8th, bringing in a bit more of a serious, structured, organized thought process. Thank God, because Mercury did not really enjoy being in detriment in Sag and retrograding in Sag and squaring, Saturn and Neptune. That was pretty terrible. Lunar nodes are changing signs. January 11th, that's huge because that sets a new karmic tone for the next year and a half and changes the axis of the eclipses. The sun will enter Aquarius January 19th, and Mercury will enter Aquarius January 27th. Now, in terms of retrogrades and direct changes, direct motion changes, not a lot happening this month for that. Uranus stations direct January 30th. That is a big deal. But just keep in mind that relative to a lot of months, there's not a lot of changes happening with the retrogrades. And now let's go into the transits, and I'm actually going to adjust the screen here. So we've been looking at a static screen, but now we're going to make this more dynamic. So let's go right into January 1st and 2nd, which you see here. Venus is sort of leaving behind that square to Uranus, but I still think it is square Uranus in that closing square. So what happens there? When Venus squares Uranus, it can bring about disruption and instability within relationships, meaning in this case that somebody in your life who's close to you could suddenly change their mind about, whether or not they want to be with you. But I think in a lot of situations here, it's actually going to bring up kind of a fun energy for many of you, whether it's at a community event or with friends or at a New Year's party or something. It's actually great for gatherings and even joining new communities. What I don't like about it is that it's juxtaposed with the Mars-Pluto opposition. So it does feel like group gatherings can be a little bit, there can be a lot of friction that's created in those group settings. And it's also a really great, effective time to consider investing in technology, technological equipment. In my own life, I'm thinking about getting the new iPhone around this time. And this is the closing square of a Venus-Uranus cycle that I think began in middle of May. Then the opening square, I think, was early August, and then the opposition was mid-October. So think about mid-May, early August, and mid-October. Those are three key points in this Venus-Uranus cycle, and we are in the closing, sort of checkpoint in this cycle. Now, there is a closing sextile of Venus and Uranus, which will actually happen in this month of January, but I tend to find that the conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, the hard aspects, tend to be the most noticeable in the collective consciousness. So then we move on to the Mars-Pluto opposition, which also occurs from January 1st all the way through mid-January, arguably, when you include the orb of influence. So the Mars-Pluto opposition, as I described already, is a little bit, it's very stubborn, obstinate, vengeful, aggressive, sometimes, though, internalizes a lot of frustration and can be very, very resilient, but also relentless in trying to take what it sees as, its rightful property or something, or it can even possess and take energy from people. So avoid like energy vampires right now, all the way through mid-January. Avoid people who get under your skin. Avoid manipulative people, and don't fight fire with fire. If you respond to aggression with aggression, then it just like continues to compound and combust eventually. And also avoid any like disputes or fights over validation. So if you're in like a friend group where people are competing to be noticed or competing almost for their pride, or whatever, like where they just want to be recognized, and you don't want to be around people who are too prideful, or people who have, an addiction to validation or an ego issue. If they're egomaniacs, like they could really ruffle your feathers right now. The Mars retrograde in Leo at the beginning of this opposition, is a nice time though to rediscover your inner child. But when it retrogrades in Cancer, it will still oppose Pluto by the orb of influence for a while. But when it retrogrades in Cancer, it's going to be a lot more focused on the protection and defense of what you care about. And you will reconsider how you are nurturing yourself, who you care about, your family, and so on. It will create a bit of, again, conflict within families, roommates, among landlords, within properties, and so on. Then we do have the Venus-Saturn conjunction. So I'm going to jump all the way to January 13th now, because I want to highlight this conjunction. And I'm going to get into the new and full moons, by the way, in a bit. But for now, just know that the Venus-Saturn conjunction starts to really be felt January 13th, and it kind of continues until about, the 25th or so. Now, the Venus-Saturn conjunction, this is something that can be very positive because Venus is exalted in Pisces. Venus being, love, harmony, balance, creativity, money, relationships, diplomacy. In Pisces, it's almost a divine love, a devotional love, a higher love, a sacrificial love. And conjunct Saturn affords this a lot of longevity, commitment, dependability. So some of you may say, I do to somebody, although I would be very cautious about proposing, getting engaged, or married at any point during the Venus pre-shadow phase, which actually starts on January 28th, approximately. So really like towards from the end of January all the way through, let's find it. I mean, April 12th, I guess. I guess I already knew the date. So April 12th is when Venus stations direct. From January 28th to April 12th, just a horrendous time to do anything like get engaged, get married. And I get the question a lot of like, what happens if I have a natal Venus retrograde? That certainly helps. That certainly helps on a personal level. But remember that there are externalities whenever there's retrogrades, meaning that other people are also experiencing the retrogrades in a more difficult way if they don't have a natal retrograde with that planet. And that can create external effects on you. It's almost like pollution. Like in economics, they talk about how pollution is an externality. Like other people suffering from a retrograde can be projected onto you. So if you and your spouse have Venus retrograde, I guess that's fine. But like January 28th through April 12th is like really not a great window for committing, saying yes, don't propose. Honestly, I just don't think you should. Don't propose, don't get married at that time. And if you are already having a wedding scheduled, in the springtime, like or March or something, then like consult an astrologer based on your exact charts, right? So like don't rely just on this YouTube video. But if you like are planning a wedding for late January, February, March, early April, and you're like, wow, that seems like now I'm questioning it, I would recommend you go consult an astrologer. I think I have 7 or 8 appointments left in 2025 and nothing until no appointments are available until April. So you wouldn't be able to see me about it, but you could consult any number of astrologers who have appointments open in 2025. And again, I have like 7 spots left in 2025, but they're all in April and May. So anyways, I'm not trying to scare people, but like I'm trying to be realistic. Like in late January, there are some pockets, or sorry, mid-January, the conjunction of Venus and Saturn. I like it. I mostly like that conjunction. But once we get into like January 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, Venus is starting to reach Neptune, causing maybe some confusion in relationships. And it's in a pre-shadow phase. So a lot of the relationship choices are subject to change or be reconsidered. Now, again, Venus conjunct Neptune and the North Node is starting to take shape at the very end of January. And that's wonderful in a lot of ways, even though it's pre-shadow. With the North Node, I do think you can make a strong argument that anyone you're sort of sacrificially devoting yourself to in a sort of like, at the level of a divine love, that is serving your destiny. The North Node is trying to move forward, achieve its potential. The Venus-Neptune conjunction could also signal some amazing moments in the fashion industry, some incredible creative feats, and, some amazing things could happen in the film industry as well. And you could also kind of come up with some really creative fashion ideas or creative ideas. I mean, so it's not bad. It's not all bad, but I'm just saying, be very careful about the extent of your relationship commitments in terms of making new commitments or, introducing a new level of commitment from late January until April 12th. Because during those times, Venus pre-shadow means that, again, those choices are all subject to change. Now, Venus is also creativity and money. So, major financial changes around those times could also be reconsidered, or you could continue to reflect on a creative project well into April. I think that the tax season in 2025 is going to be horrendously messy. So I don't know if you're starting to already make arrangements to prepare for tax season at the end of January. Just be very methodical about it, right? Be very discerning in terms of like hiring the right advisor, accountants, and really doing your due diligence with your taxes. Because the Venus retrograde this year on Saturn and Neptune is not all bad, like I said, but can get a little messy just given its proximity to tax season in the United States. So now we also have the Sun opposing Mars. I want to go to that one, January 15th. And the Sun Mars opposition is marking really the peak of the Mars retrograde, and Mars is as bright as it can be at that time. So you're looking at the chart here, the Sun Mars opposition being the peak of the Mars retrograde, it could grant you some really effective strategies for managing the second part of the Mars retrograde, the second half of the Mars retrograde. It could help you come up with new ways to, again, cope with stress or friction. It could help you set more effective boundaries with people. It could help you reclaim your inner masculine, archetypally speaking. It could also, with Mars and Cancer, help you be more steadfast and decisive in protecting either family members or nurturing people who you care about, or for resolving conflict within families. But just know that January 15th, approximately, this is when the tension and agitation associated with and exhaustion associated with Mars retrograde is at its peak. So you will, around January 15th, want to be especially mindful and kind of how you are coming across to people. You don't want to come across too aggressively. And you also want to realize that many people will not be able to cope with stress at that time. They will not be very effective leaders. They will be very high strung. So by watching this video, you know that around January 15th, you can, sort of sidestep that. But again, reflect on it. How do I reclaim my self-assertion? How do I set better boundaries and so on? Then we go to January 20th. There's a Sun-Pluto conjunction in the sign of Aquarius. And the Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius is, very dramatic because the Sun and Pluto have aligned in Capricorn for many years. And last year was almost, right? 2024 was almost aligned in Capricorn or in Aquarius, but not quite. It was like 29, 59 Cap. This time it's solidly happening in Aquarius, and the Sun is executives, leaders, Pluto is death and rebirth and transformation. So on or around January 20th, there was a transformation of the executive position. Now, literally in the United States, that is Trump's inauguration date. Now, with Pluto being transformation and rebirth, is there some wild card moment where suddenly there's someone else as president? I mean, I hesitate to say that would be plausible at all. Now, I know there's a few astrologers who are weirdly clinging to this prediction of theirs that like Harris will somehow still end up becoming president, even though Trump's victory has been literally certified in the Electoral College. I'm not really sure what's going on with the sort of those predictions. I feel like if anything, if there was a plutonic transformation at that level, it would probably have more to do with JD Vance or someone becoming president. But I don't see how like the candidate who lost would end up taking over. So anyways, there's some weirdness going on in the astrological community about that in particular. But I just want to kind of like reinforce that in July of 2024, in my case, I said Harris is probably going to take over the Democratic ticket. 4 days later, 5 days later, she did. I said Harris probably has the clearest path to victory because of her progressed moon aligning with the U.S. sun. By late October or mid-October, I should say, it became clear to me that Trump was going to win. I said on YouTube, Trump has an 80% chance of winning this election. And he ended up winning. And I didn't really think that, Harris would ever lead in the polls. I just thought that Trump might have had a difficulty around October 17th with that Aries full moon. He didn't end up having something that was like insurmountable. He did have questions about his cognition, but like I predicted, but nothing insurmountable. So, anyways, Trump seems to be on his way to the presidency. So again, I'm not really sure what's going on with some of the astrologers who are saying that there's still like a black swan event. I don't really see what that would be. I did say that maybe there's some travel issues with Trump in December, but that was all about him canceling his New Jersey flight because of the drones. January 6th, there is a Mars retrograde at 29 Cancer, squaring the January 6th, 2021 Mars at 29 Aries. Maybe there's some rehash of January 6th. I don't know why that would be. I don't know if it's like, if there's some, investigation that is revealed about the original, like sort of January 6th event that agitates a certain group of people or something. But that's the only sort of like blockage I'm seeing in the transits before the inauguration. Like maybe around January 6th, there's some shenanigans. Maybe there's some kind of like, I don't want to call it uprising, but maybe there's some riots again around January 6th, or maybe there's just major news that's being, announced about someone who was involved in January 6th. I mean, sometimes I even wonder if like there's something being released, some kind of like investigation being released about the sort of July 13th Butler, Pennsylvania rally that Trump, was attacked at. I don't know if there's something being revealed about that agitates the Trump sort of base and somehow ends up being connected to some kind of like January 6th event at this time. But otherwise, it just feels like the Sun Pluto conjunction here is is a transformation of leadership. And obviously, when Trump takes office, all of the leaders across every nation in the world are going to reposition themselves in order to interface with the Trump administration, because the Trump administration represents something completely different than the Biden administration. So you're seeing how like Justin Trudeau is interacting with Trump in a completely different way than he was with Biden. And so are many other leaders. So it could be as simple as that. It could signal that there's just a different orientation to leadership across the world. However, there is a niche, a very, very small possibility that someone else does become president around that time. But if it happened, it would probably be JD Vance, simply because his Pluto, well, he is VP, but also because his Pluto is, or his sun is conjunct Trump's Pluto. And on Inauguration Day, Mars will be retrograde on Trump's Saturn. I mean, that is in the 12th house. That is quite problematic, actually, in some ways. But I would argue that the Mars retrograde on his Saturn, if anything, is announcing these very heavy-handed changes under this sort of uh, assumption that, or under the sort of rhetoric that he is sort of going against the incumbent or the legacy way of doing things or something, where maybe he's saying we need to strip away these services and these services, and we need to downsize these things. Like maybe he's going to give a very heavy-handed speech. That could be part of the Mars retrograde opposing Saturn, where he feels like he's going up against all kinds of like, I don't know, hurdles and blockages to trying to enacting his policies. Maybe he'll find it more difficult than he wants it to, because he probably has all these aspirations to transform the federal government, but might run into all kinds of competing interests and variables that he, maybe didn't consider. So that could be his Mars Saturn experience. Of course, it could be more daunting than that. It could be, the two malefics when they meet like that, it can lead to like collisions or, something else that just sort of, affects I don't know, the energy or something. But for the most part, again, in the spirit of like not being hyperbolic, I feel like the Sun Pluto conjunction is probably just a transformation of leadership. But in Aquarius, I mean, it is going to inspire new generations of people to, create a new vision for a world that they're dissatisfied with currently. So, like, if you're watching this video and you're not a Trump fan and you think that the new administration is an atrocity, well, the Sun Pluto conjunction is going to inspire people to maybe eventually run for office themselves in the future, or to again come up with a totally new paradigm or vision for society. I mean, like the Sun Pluto conjunction could empower people to ignite all kinds of grassroots movements. So I speak to an audience that is across all aisles. Like I'm not trying to, implement any agenda on my side politically. I know that some of you voted for Harris. I know that some of you voted for Trump. I'm sure, right? Like statistically, that's the case. But my job as an astrologer is to give you the options for how to utilize these transits, and I really don't care like about like I don't try to put my own political opinions into this reading. Like I could care less about my own opinions. I only care about giving you the tools to activate the transits in a way that serves you the best. So if you don't like Trump at all, well, the Sun Pluto conjunction is giving you a way to tap into new communities that inspire you to, advocate for the policies you care about down the line and to, again, generate new communities and ideas and maybe even to succeed at a local political level, to apply, to let your new ideas percolate in the social media sphere, which is Aquarian. And if you're a Trump supporter, then, the Sun Pluto conjunction, I think, is kind of showing that Trump is going to set a completely new tone in the geopolitical sphere. And, obviously that's just naturally what happens. But I think that there is a new vision, a new perception in the public of like what the presidency even is. I think that there's a lot of people who almost like, again, who like people who didn't vote for Trump who almost view Trump as sort of like trying to tear down everything they stand for. With Pluto, we're getting into extremes, right? So, anyways, I could go on and on about this. But the Sun Pluto conjunction is very powerful. Definitely will be one of the defining moments of January. And we do have a Mars Mercury Chiron T square shortly thereafter, January 21st through 25th. Again, as I talked about before, Mars opposite Mercury, slightly accident prone. I have Mars opposite Mercury, meaning I have Mars retrograde. It is a very rare aspect. But I was very accident prone as a child. My father was paralyzed in a motorcycle accident. I mean, these are all things that can happen when you have a Mars Mercury opposition in your birth chart, especially in my case, because I have Mars in Gemini, Mercury in Sag. But the Mars Mercury opposition happens every so often, every 2 odd years. And I mean, the opposition is very argumentative. It's very, talkative, persuasive in a way. It's not a bad time to like maybe negotiate something like very, I don't know, vehemently to argue your case for something. And yeah, to vocalize your opinion about something, but it can be like hyper opinionated and can kind of wreak havoc. What I don't like about this opposition is that it is squaring Chiron. So when I see Mercury, which is like locomotive, transportation, movement, opposite Mars, which is like explosion in a way, or fire, or sudden events, squaring Chiron, which is like injury, act, and in a way it could be like an accident almost, or insecurities or wounds, health. I wonder if like the Mars Mercury Chiron T square is showing some kind of accident in the headlines, or even if there's like a just some kind of skirmish, especially with Mars retrograde in Cancer, family infighting or some kind of argument at the grocery store that goes too far. That's kind of the energy of it. So I would say like probably in late January, like in the early 20s of January there. Just feels like there could be some sort of even like government dispute between like politicians or something. I don't know. Mercury and Capricorn makes me think about like institutions and governments. So it could be like a CEO feuding with one of their, colleagues. It could be like a president feuding within their own administration. Um, yeah, it feels like there's someone inside the boardroom or inside the administration who suddenly is like an enemy or something to that leader. It does feel like very precarious actually. Um, but otherwise there just could be like a high profile vehicular accident, motorcycle accident, bicycle accident in the news. And probably not airplane related. I mean, Uranus will station direct Shortly thereafter, a week later, while the Sun and Pluto are in Aquarius, the sign that is ruled by Uranus and kind of associated with aviation in a way. And oh, well, actually, I wonder if there's something with the space shuttle or whatever that is, the Boeing, the Boeing space, uh, I don't know what it is, like a space shuttle of some kind. But I think that there could be something weird happening with that space shuttle. Like maybe the return is botched, or maybe the return is delayed again, or there's some controversy with it. But yeah, I'm a little worried about that situation, to be honest. But yeah, this Mars Mercury opposition generally, though, is very argumentative, like I said, very opinionated, and suggests to me that a lot of families, a lot of prominent families will be clashing with each other. Governmental uh, employees or employees at corporations could be feuding with each other. Um, like, yeah, I don't want to get too dark here, but it just feels like there's almost like somebody maybe like, yeah, using their vehicle, you know, kind of a scary way. I don't know. It just I don't like this T square very much. So now we have this what's next? Sorry. Venus trining Mars and sextiling Uranus, by the way, at the end of the month. That's nice. That can actually introduce some kind of creativity into your life, passion in a relationship. Now we also do have the Venus pre-shadow phase beginning January 28th. Like I said, January 28th, relationships they don't collapse or anything, but any decisions you make in your relationships, meaning with significant friends or business partners or romantic partners, it's subject to be reflected on between then and April 12th, pretty much. And then Mercury is conjunct Pluto January 28th. So yeah, this is a tricky Mercury transit, from pretty much January 21 through the end of the month. Because it's like you notice here, as I'm showing you, Mercury's opposing Mars. It's impatient. I mean, that's what it is. Like Mercury opposite Mars is very impatient. It's very quick to say something. And actually, when I bring that back to the government or to maybe corporations, it does feel like someone is saying something that they're sharing information that they're not supposed to share at a governmental level or at an executive level in a corporation, maybe. And like that information is compromising somebody. So that's what I don't like about late January. It's almost like perhaps the CEO has said something in confidence to like the CFO, but someone overhears that and then says something about it. Or within an administration, somebody leaks information about, again, something that compromises that leader. Um, or someone's just saying things or speaking out of turn or saying things that like completely just shred any sense of diplomacy apart. And shortly thereafter, it conjuncts Pluto. So with the Mercury Pluto conjunction in late January, it's like, is that information released online? Is this information about something within a federal investigation, an institution that investigates things? Is it, um, yeah, is it like a file or, a previously redacted file that is declassified? It feels like information is being declassified here, to the detriment of certain people who are still alive. I mean, it might be, some information might be declassified about the distant past. I don't know if it's something with like JFK. I don't know. I just keep seeing JFK references the last few months, just in my own sort of like observation of things. And I don't know if that applies here, but I just feel like there's something is being declassified here. And it could spark outrage, or again, it could really paint someone who's currently serving as a politician in a really bad light. Um, and I think with Mercury conjunct Pluto, yeah, secrets could be released about politicians or within the political sphere. This information could also be leaked through social media. I don't know if like social media data is being hacked. Like part of me wonders if the Sun Pluto conjunction in Aquarius has something to do with like a cybersecurity incident that affects a leader. Um, But this is the part of the video where I am mostly channeling. I just sense there's something being unredacted and maybe declassified and being very quickly disseminated through the internet. Now, there's another theme though that well, with Mercury conjunct Pluto, that's kind of like a Princess Diana transit. Like I know I talked about that a couple other videos ago, but like I don't know. I keep wondering if there's some kind of crash. It does feel a little bit that way, but the Mercury Pluto conjunction could also mark an invasion of privacy, right? Which is kind of what I've talked about. But it feels like maybe someone's privacy is being invaded. Maybe there's a hack, like I said, and also some restrictions being instituted, whether it's a TikTok ban temporarily or, yeah, I mean, certain nations instituting social media bans for certain age groups. Yeah, there will be a lot of information, though, coming to light in late January about the activities of certain politicians, maybe certain celebrities with the Saturn and Pisces transit we've been talking about for ages now. Maybe it has something to do with Mercury and Pluto at the 0 degree point, pretty much, of Aquarius. Maybe it has something to do with the product that was released to the public in December of 2020, if you understand what I mean by that. Maybe there's an investigation into that. Again, the product, I'll just keep calling it that, the product that was released in December of 2020. Perhaps there's an investigation about that. Because with Mars retrograde in Leo, it is possible that some cardiac issues did come up. And I don't know, like there's something a little weird happening there. So this could be an investigation of a scientist or of science or science, sorry, an investigation of the approach that was taken towards creating a certain product, whether that's pharmaceutical or otherwise. Um, this could be an investigation into the scientific community and their incentives to promote certain research or something to validate certain recommendations, like whatever it is. Yeah, but I think there's an investigation either being launched in late January or the results of an investigation being announced around that time. So also, now let's actually jump into some of the predictions for January beyond what I've discussed. So I know that I've discussed sort of from kind of date by date some things, but now I want to kind of meld this together and in a different way, I guess, to give you these predictions. Again, January is definitely going to change the energy from December, which again, I think December was actually kind of a slow month despite some of the major news events. Like I said in a video recently, time was almost elongated when Mercury was squaring Saturn. Very almost very heavy energy. And people's thought processes were becoming more narrow and pessimistic. But yeah, so January, like I said before, it will showcase the peak of the Mars retrograde cycle when the sun opposes Mars. And that's going to make the red planet as bright as it can be in this synodic cycle. And Mercury, again, will eventually oppose Mars and square Chiron. So I think that ultimately this is going to inflame some of the rhetoric and dialogue at all levels. Now, Mars retrograde in Cancer will force us to revisit any conflict or frustration between October 4th and November 3rd of 2024, because that's when Mars was in its pre-shadow in Cancer. It could wreak havoc within families, Cancer, but it will also help people manage stress more effectively within families, hopefully. Now, when it comes to the Sun-Pluto conjunction, again, the Sun will align with Pluto as the Trump administration takes office, signaling a complete transformation at the executive level. Now, with the Jupiter-Saturn square still lingering, by the way, the second opening square in this Jupiter-Saturn cycle of 20 years, I would potentially expect sweeping changes with new executive orders from the Trump administration and some travel restrictions. Border security is probably going to tighten, and it will become more difficult to travel in to the United States from certain places. Now, I think this might motivate students at certain colleges in the US to mount protests against these restrictions. Maybe even professors will get involved because it compromises the status of certain international student visas, potentially. So we've seen how universities are recommending that students come back early if they're international. I do think this is going to be part of a massive legal battle, and you know, it's going to spark a lot of protests. And I think that in 2025, which I'll save for my Substack subscribers, but in 2025, there will likely be travel restrictions for many reasons, including maybe because of a pathogen as the nodes shift into Virgo and Pisces. But if you want to see my presentation about the astrology of 2025, I will be announcing that soon for my paid Substack subscribers. So otherwise, though, the Sun Pluto conjunction in Aquarius will emphasize privacy and social media and nuclear power and electricity and energy. So TikTok could be temporarily banned around January 19th and 20th. And also let me pause there. The reason I'm saying that is because TikTok, their birth chart, which I don't have the exact date for, but I have the month for, September 2016, does have the south node. It positions the south node around 12 degrees of Pisces. And Saturn is pretty close to that right now. And it's also opposing the Virgo Mercury in that chart, because Mercury was in Virgo for much of September 2016. So when you factor in Saturn opposite Mercury, that's shutting down communication, and Saturn on the south node maybe is disconnecting TikTok from certain governments. So yeah, I think TikTok probably will be temporarily banned. I'd be pretty surprised if it's permanently banned, but there might be this sort of weird interregnum where TikTok is actually not available, because technically it is supposed to be banned on January 19th. However, there is a Supreme Court case on January 10th about this. And I guess I might as well look at this January 10th date to see if there's anything else I can glean about it. But yeah, I mean, the moon will be in Gemini, conjunct Jupiter, planet representing natural law and legal cases, higher court cases. Yeah, I mean, that's not happening. That's happening right as the nodes are shifting as well. Yeah, I feel like Sun is squaring Chiron and opposing Mars. Yeah, I mean, well, if you look at, I mean, first of all, if you look at the position of Mercury, communication and whatnot, I mean, it's in Capricorn, not retrograde. I feel like that is fine. The moon's alignment with Jupiter. I don't know when they'll make a decision about the case, if it's on the 10th, but the moon Jupiter conjunction is not bad either, with Jupiter being the greater benefic. Venus is not quite conjunct Saturn yet, and it's exalted in Pisces, which is pretty good. I mean, the Mars retrograde opposite Pluto shows that there could be an upsetting sort of decision or something, but just like on balance, looking at the chart, which again, this is kind of incomplete data because you should really look at the transits to TikTok's chart, which I've already talked about. But the energy around that time is not bad per se, but with Mars retrograde in Cancer, it could agitate people within a certain like homeland or country, and I don't know, maybe it's something to do with TikTok being banned. But I think that regardless of the decision, it seems like Trump's administration is more sympathetic to TikTok than Biden's administration, but obviously he would have to navigate a lot of hurdles with the legislative branch, which has already decided to ban it. And that could be part of his Mars retrograde on his Saturn. Maybe he's trying to navigate all the hoops and convince all the senators and representatives to get on board with it, and then maybe he'll have more trouble with it than he expects. So anyways, also nations or states could institute social media bans. And I said states. I mean, in the US, like even if TikTok ends up being given the green light to continue in the US, I still wonder if states would try to ban it. And other nations might follow Australia's lead and, ban social media for certain age groups, like I said. Now the lunar nodes will switch into Pisces and Virgo on January 11th, and this is going to spur karmic changes in a new axis of your birth chart. Now the focus will shift in this case over the next year and a half towards health and also religion. I think religion will become more popular again. I think that like church services will become more popular. Also, yeah, religious movements will take shape. Spiritual movements will take shape. I'm going to get into that in my 2025 video for, the astrology of 2025. But, what's interesting is that during Sagittarius season, the sun was squaring Neptune towards the end of Sag season. And like, even right now as I'm filming this, Mercury is in Sag, squaring Saturn in Pisces. So Sag season and early Capricorn season has been kind of rough because it has forced people to reckon with health issues, especially chronic health issues. We've seen unfortunately, we've seen a lot of people diagnosed with chronic ailments or various cancers potentially. I mean, and it's a lot to do with environmental pollution, toxins, personal choices, a lot of things, obesity, maybe. I don't know, but there's a lot of reasons, right? Why there's been various epidemics, especially in the United States. But the nodal shift will only underscore the themes of health. And so as a fall, it's interesting that we're following up Sag season with the Sun Neptune square with this shift. So like we've already, I think, seen how, whether it's personal habits, lifestyle choices, pollution, toxins, plastics, synthetic materials, ingredients in like makeup even, which actually is now, I just read an article about this a few hours ago, how makeup companies might have to take out a certain ingredient that comes from, I think, asbestos. So with Trump's administration coming in and RFK Jr., pledging basically to take a different approach to health and like look at fluoride and all these other things. Again, regardless of how you feel about him, whether you think he's just completely off his rocker or he's onto something, I don't really care what you think about him for the sake of this video. The fact is that he is a reflection of the transits that I'm talking about. And as the North Node and Saturn and Neptune start to kind of merge together in Pisces this year in 2025, I mean, there's going to be a reckoning regarding health and healthcare because, clearly a lot of people are upset about the healthcare industry and like the profit motive behind it. But underlying that, it's like, well, why do so many people need claims, have to file claims in the first place? Because there is a health crisis in this country. So it's like, why do people have all these chronic ailments, right? Like the North Node and South Node of Virgo Pisces are going to help people, I think, take a more holistic approach to medicine, find more energetic healing tactics. They will look at the body as a system. They will look at how the earth itself is a living, breathing organism and how we are influenced by our own pillaging of the earth and denigration of the environment. We will start to see how the specialization approach in medicine and Western medicine is no longer working. Just as an example, I know someone who went into the hospital recently with, to treat one serious condition because it was a condition in a certain sort of system or area of the body. They only saw one specialist regarding that issue they had. The specialist fixed that one issue. They went back home 2 weeks later. They're back in the hospital, and now they have a different issue to address. When in reality, there's probably something systemic underlying all of it, but it wasn't addressed in their initial hospital visit because we have a specialization approach in Western medicine. That does not work anymore. On top of that, the conveniences of modernity have created all these environmental toxins that are sickening us. So we're in a pretty dire situation. Life expectancy is declining in the United States. Obesity rates are at 40% now. But I think about 80% of the United States is actually technically overweight. So there is a really serious health crisis that people will get to the roots of during this nodal transit. There are other themes, of course, again, like religious movements, spiritual movements, like I've talked about. Sort of a changing approach to celebrities, meaning celebrities will continue to lose momentum, I think, as people shift towards religion or, spirituality. They won't look at celebrities as saviors in any way. Anyways, Venus and Saturn will meet in Pisces, like I said. This could signal some high-profile divorces among celebrities and splits among celebrities. But it also might reflect some huge agreements pivotal agreements between creative companies or creative figures to work on something together. Now, Mars will square Chiron for much of the month. I don't like this square very much. Countries will continue to become more reactive and sensitive to the slightest threat to their homeland. Instability in the Middle East and Ukraine will continue. And within Syria, Syria's entire regime collapsed, and that's creating a vacuum and potentially a fight between various factions over that territory. Within the US, there could be some internal strife between governors and the Trump administration, especially regarding immigration policies, which the Trump administration will be very aggressive regarding immigration. I can see that in the astrology. And both sides will feel like they're under attack for different reasons. The left, because of the Trump administration's swift executive orders, and the right, because of maybe, I don't know, maybe they will believe that previous border policies have created vulnerabilities within the nation. Because I know that, for example, the woman who was burned alive on the New York subway, apparently the attacker was a previously deported immigrant. I don't remember from which nation, but regardless of, again, what you believe, incidents like that can be utilized by politicians to justify certain immigration policies. But what I'm saying is perhaps the right feels as though the open border policy has put the nation under duress and sort of led to a situation where they're flying blind and not really sure exactly who has been let in and what they're up to. So, in extreme cases, you have to wonder if some states will try and ally with each other against the federal government. Now, secession is highly unlikely until Uranus enters Gemini, which is a Uranus return for both World War II and the Civil War, with the Civil War also featuring Neptune and Aries, which is coming. Neptune and Aries, meaning. But it's not impossible that, again, secession could happen depending on the perceived scale of the threats. Now, let's go into the lunations. So first of all, we have a Cancer full moon. And going forward on these YouTube videos, I'm not going to fully dive into these new and full moons because I've already talked about it in my 2025 horoscopes. So if you downloaded my 2025 horoscopes, then I don't want to be redundant here. Like, you already have the information on the new and full moons, how it affects your sign. If you want to engage with this content much more deeply, you can either subscribe to the paid Substack channel where I dive into the new and full moons as well in written form, or in video form like this through my Astro 2025 forecast. So anyways, the Cancer full moon is happening on January 13th at 23 Cancer. And this is aligning very closely with the peak of the Mars retrograde cycle. With the chart ruler, the moon, aligned in conjunct with the Mars retrograde, that is vitriolic. That is combustible. That is combative. That's frustrated. So a lot of people might experience strife, again, friction within their families, roommates, landlords, within their own just like sort of territory. And I do feel like this is igniting some kind of civil clash. I'm not saying literally a civil war, but like there's some kind of infighting in the US between, again, maybe governors of Democratic states with the Trump administration. It just feels like it's not a very united country at this time. But yeah, on that full moon, you'll definitely want to manage anger, avoid being angry, avoid stress, take it easy. It could, again, help you find a better way to work with the Mars retrograde to be more decisive in stressful moments. But otherwise, I think it's a tough full moon. And then we have the new moon in Aquarius, which is January 29th at 9 degrees of Aquarius, with the chart ruler, one of the chart rulers, Uranus, stationing retrograde the next day. So during this time, the Aquarius new moon, I mean, this is the beginning of something. The Cancer full moon was the ending of something. It's the release of something. So January 13th, it's like maybe you're releasing stress. Maybe you are awakening, though, to, again, improved ways to manage this Martian energy. And, the Aquarius new moon is the initiation maybe of a new mode of experimentation. Maybe you'll adopt a new way of looking at technology or working with tech or working with social media, a new way of engaging with politics, a novel way of approaching anything, really, a new community-centered way of doing something. Maybe it's the birth of a new grassroots movement. Mars is retrograde, though, squaring Chiron. So very, again, very, very much filled with friction, sort of unnecessary competition. It does feel like people are easily inflamed at this time still. Feels like people are suddenly wanting to go a different direction, maybe against the wishes of a family member, or again, people are interpreting very small things as threats as well. Pluto is opposing the World War II Pluto, so I don't know if this has something to do with nuclear power, not necessarily the deployment of it, but maybe the discussion around nuclear power and its utilization. There This is a small chance, but maybe there's some solar flare that like shuts down an electric grid. Maybe there's just a discussion about new ways to use energy and harness energy. And at that time, by that time, and the Cancer full moon, I guess, the nodes have shifted into Virgo and Pisces. So the focus is on, just as an undercurrent, there's an undercurrent of a focus on health, creativity, spirituality, devotion, divine love, and everything. I think that's wonderful. So briefly, I'm going to go into the horoscopes for each sign. But again, I'm not going to cover this into the level of depth, nearly the level of depth that I have for in my 2025 horoscopes. So let's start with Aries, and we'll go through each key lunation point. So for Aries, the Cancer full moon is January 13th in your fourth house. And by the way, apply this to your sun, moon, and rising signs. So Aries, Cancer full moon, January 13th, could be a major blow up in your family, honestly. It could be a major argument in your family, or you're setting better boundaries within your family. Some of you may start to decide to move or think about your home differently. And you may just approach caregiving differently. Some of you might, get into a clash with your mother or a caregiver. Venus and Saturn are in the 12th. So some relationships are falling away for you, being flushed out. But there could also be sort of a beautiful divine connection with your spirituality forming, or there could be a relationship that is sort of past life, sort of focused. I mean, it's originating in a past life, but it has this higher transcendent love associated with it. But the Aquarius new moon is in your 11th house, January 29th. This could be the impetus for forming a new friendship. You could involve yourself in a new community. You could launch a new social media project, and you could even, go to a networking event. I kind of like that. Mars is squaring Chiron, though. So again, argumentation, agitation may continue within your family. So now we go to Taurus. Taurus, the Cancer full moon, January 13th is in your third house. So for Taurus is January 13th, the full moon there is a time where your communication style is going to be very emotional, most likely. So be very careful with how you communicate. Naturally, you're probably going to have a very intense argument with someone, but some of you might complete an educational endeavor. You might return from a trip. You might face some stress or tension while you're traveling locally. Some of you could get into a fight with a sibling or a neighbor. But otherwise, I think this is just a time to vocalize yourself very firmly about like either what you believe, what your opinion is, and just like really make a statement. And then Venus and Saturn are in the 11th. So some amazing, I think, friendships can form, or just continue at that time, or you might be bonding with a friend quite nicely. The Aquarius new moon, January 29th, is in your 10th house of career. So at the end of January, that's a nice launch point for a new career path, a new approach to career, maybe a new parenting role that you take on, or an authority role that you take on. You might take on a more experimental job, a job with more novelty, a job in tech. I mean, you don't have to do that, but it's actually a nice time to initiate a new career or a new role, or again, a new parenting sort of responsibility, or a new dynamic with your family. So now let's go to Gemini. Gemini, you have the Cancer full moon, January 13th in your second house. This could be you arguing over money, advocating for your self-worth, realizing that you are exhausted because you're trying too hard to accumulate more resources than everybody, meaning more money or possessions. Maybe you decide at that point to release some possessions, to take a well, I think even to stand up though for your self-worth. I kind of like that in a way. You could really stand up for your self-worth at that time. Some of you are trying to advocate maybe for a different salary, or you're fighting over possessions. But it is ultimately a really nice full moon for, again, advocating for your, again, self-worth. Venus and Saturn conjunct in the 10th. Really, really strong professional relationships can be formed, and you could agree to do something really unique and creative in your career. And I think that for some of you, any like strained relations with a parent could smooth out actually at that time. And I do think some of you could, yeah, work on something more creative. Like I said, I think that's really nice. And then the Aquarius new moon is in your ninth house on January 29th. And the Aquarius new moon in the ninth is a pretty nice opportunity to, travel somewhere long distance, to embark on a new educational track, to maybe do something new in a media context, to potentially to take on a new teaching role, or to just adopt a new worldview or perspective. And Mars does square Chiron from the 2nd to the 11th. So avoid any fights with friends, although you may end up disputing something with a friend over possessions, or maybe you'll have a disagreement with someone in your friend group or community about values. So now we have the Cancer full moon for Cancers to talk about. So the Cancer full moon is in your first house of self on January 13th. This is potentially an epic release of, anything that's frustrating you. Maybe you're letting go of something that was previously stressing you out. Others might experience some frustrations and tension within their families, to be honest. Maybe whether it be health issues or discussions over responsibility within the family. But a lot of Cancers are just going to be very emotional at this time, very overwhelmed, but also, again, increasingly decisive about, boundaries, asserting yourself, and advocating for what you need, and putting yourself first in a way, but in a good way. And coming up with better ways to manage stress. But I think you are really just like putting your foot down and saying, enough is enough, and you're showing your teeth, and maybe even in a relationship, or really with anyone, to be honest. Venus is conjunct Saturn in the ninth. So there's some promising opportunities for you with like traveling or media publishing, education. Yeah, I think that, yeah, teaching. Yeah, if you're a Cancer who's interested in writing or media, this is a good year for you, which I talk about in my 2025 horoscopes, which are available in the description box below. Then the Aquarius new moon is January 29th. This is in your eighth house. So I mean, the eighth house, it could be a new a new approach to your investments. You might be able to manage debt in a different way. Some of you, honestly, are finding out about an inheritance that you're receiving, because Mars retrograde in Cancer in your first house, Chiron in the 10th of parents or family in a way, or kind of authority figures. I'm not trying to say this is all Cancers. I mean, it's not everybody, but a lot of Cancers, honestly, probably have had health issues in their family the last few months, especially recently with Chiron stationing direct in the 10th. So some of you could be either could be investing in something, taking out a loan, hiring someone, attracting an investor, but other Cancers are hearing news about an inheritance. Maybe a family member is passing away, but again, it's not everybody. It would be something that you already know about. I'm trying to break news for you. Like some of you have been, and I'm not saying the inheritance maybe takes effect at that time. Like maybe, let's say you have a grandparent who's struggling. It's not that they necessarily are passing at this time. It could be that you finally have a discussion because they are aging. You have a discussion about assets and ownership. And some of you might also merge your finances with a partner. Maybe you combine credit cards or you invest in something together, or could be that. So now let's go to the sign of Leo and look at the Cancer full moon for you. So Leo is the Cancer full moon, January 13th, is in your 12th house of isolation, meditation, spirituality, dreams, and the unconscious. Not a great full moon for you, although there are ways to manage it. Get the 2025 horoscopes to fully dive into that. But the full moon in the 12th, you're probably gonna have trippy dreams, probably gonna have some really wild dreams, and some of them could involve battles that you fought in a past life, honestly. Some of you will have disrupted sleep patterns at this time. Your hormones could be, well, your sleep hygiene might be a little off, and this could create mood swings for you. Like a lot of mood swings, I think, for Leos there. With Venus Saturn conjunct in the eighth, though, maybe some encouraging investment decisions are made close to this time. But this is a really important full moon for you to rest, relax, recuperate, restore your energy, to not overdo it. Otherwise, again, you will go through a lot of mood swings. And then again, pay attention to your dreams. There may be something informative there. You may notice synchronicities, alignments, spiritual, numerical alignments, consistent messages. I think it's actually really powerful in that sense, a new way of connecting with your spirit guides. And maybe you will arrive at a different way to nurture yourself every day, especially in the mindfulness department. And then we have the Aquarius new moon for you, Jan 29. The Aquarius new moon is in your seventh house of partnership. So Jan 29, we do have the, potentially for you, a new commitment, a new partnership emerging, a new significant friend, a new business partner, a new romantic partner, or just a new dynamic in your relationship. Venus and Saturn are aligned in the eighth. So a lot of you are, again, merging with someone physically, financially, psychically, emotionally. And the chart ruler Uranus is stationing direct the next day. So any business partnerships you form are going to help you catalyze potentially a reinvention of your career. So now we're going to go to January 13th. What's going on with Virgos? So Virgos, you have Cancer full moon in your 11th house of friends, communities, social media. The full moon there could be the release of, a certain friendship don't want anymore. You could get very testy and argumentative on social media or in a political sphere. Some of you may feel frustrated about, where things are heading generally, and you want to get more involved in a humanitarian cause or something. This is a great time, though, to stand up for yourself within a friend group or community or with a friend. If you have someone who's been kind of bullying you around, maybe you say, I don't appreciate that. And some of you might go to a concert, though. You might just go to a performance. You might do something kind of like a group activity, and it might, in a weird way, help empower you, though, and make you feel like a little bit more nurtured, and remind you that you have to be consistently involved with your social groups and support networks in order to really rejuvenate yourself. Venus and Saturn are aligned in the seventh house. So some of you are starting to form really long-term commitments with a partner. Some of you will be tempted to propose, or maybe you will be in proposed to around that time. I mean, I think that's okay because this is pre-shadow phase of Venus at this time, at least. Although I don't know if it really makes sense to propose on a full moon because that's the ending of something. But I'm just saying, if we have to be binary about it, it's okay technically to propose or be proposed to at this time. But once we get into January 28th territory, especially as a Virgo, you want to wait until Venus retrograde is over to kind of get married or go through that proposal process. In a niche set of cases, I do wonder if some of you are finding out, this is a rare case, but I wonder if some of you are finding out that a friend cheated with your partner or something. And that's the Mars retrograde argument that you're having there. Or maybe you just have a suspicion about it. I'm not saying this will happen to many of you, but statistically, maybe 2% of Virgos will experience some kind of weird situation with a friend, and somehow that's eroding the quality of their partnership. And there's a love triangle. I'm just being honest. Some of you will have a friendship who suddenly becomes an antagonist for you. But I think for most of you, it's just like a really empowering time within friends and communities, and maybe some commitment potential comes through for you alongside that. And then we have the Aquarius new moon for Virgos, January 29th in your sixth house. This is the adoption of a new health routine, new regimen, nutritional plan, co-working dynamic, or work project, or maybe you get a pet. And maybe some of you are getting a pet at this time. And you could take a more innovative approach to your work. You could apply automation or AI to your daily like work process more effectively. Mars is squaring Chiron, so some fights within friend groups are continuing or on social media. And with Chiron in the eighth, maybe you are getting to the bottom of why certain things trigger you at a subconscious level. But yeah, the Aquarius new moon, I think is a good time to just take a new approach to health or automate and streamline some of your work processes. And maybe you're actually, again, starting to work with new people at this time. And it could even entail a new job. So now we have Libras. Libras, the Cancer full moon is in your 10th house on January 13th. Cancer full moon could be the release point and ending of a certain career or responsibility you don't want anymore. You might get into a fight with someone like a parent or someone in your family or a boss or someone you see as an authority. You might just set a more effective boundary with a parent or an authority figure. You might become a little stressed and burned out by what you're doing in your career at this time. And you might realize that you just have to work. Well, I think a lot of Libras are doing too much right now. The Libras I know are doing too much. So as a Libra, you have to stop trying to juggle 100 things. You're not, maybe you are superhuman, but you are still a human being. So, don't overdo it anymore. Gotta take a different approach to your career. And maybe you're balancing parenting and work. And I get that that's just something people have to do, but just be more strategic about it. Venus is conjunct Saturn in the sixth. So maybe there's a coworker there who's going to help you take on some of that burden. Maybe you're just getting along with a coworker quite well. Although Saturn doesn't really show warm relations. I still think in Pisces, with Venus exalted there, in Pisces being very selfless, a coworker may be willing to help you out there. And you might form a bond with a coworker that's very long lasting. Others are committing to long-term wellness and well-being through a new lifestyle. And then we have the Aquarius new moon, Jan 29, for Libras to consider. And this is in the fifth house of romance, creativity, the inner child, children, and creative performances. As a Libra, the Aquarius new moon there, it could be the birth of a new creative project. It could be that you're going on a date. It could be that you're infusing romance into your relationship again. And you could reconnect with your inner child with Mercury conjunct Pluto. You could learn a secret about one of your children or something, or child. If you have a child, they might, like a kid, not like a, if you have a child, they might reveal something to you or something like that. And also Mars is squaring Chiron. Some Libras are having disputes with their family or their parent or an authority figure or a boss. And maybe somehow that's influencing your relationship and causing some strain there. Uranus, the chart ruler, is stationing direct in the eighth house the next day. So you might be reinventing your approach to your investments or, shared possessions and assets. And you may have a deep subconscious epiphany. So now we're going to go to Scorpios. So you have the Cancer full moon, January 13th, in your ninth house of publishing, long distance travel, higher education, teaching, worldview. So the full moon for you here could be, it could be the completion of a publishing project. I'm trying to get my editing process for my book finished by this time. So it kind of applies to me as a Scorpio sun and moon. Others are returning from a long distance trip or realizing that they want to take a different approach to teaching or their educational pathway. Others are just having to assert themselves and say, no, I don't want to take this trip. Or maybe, no, I'm overextended and I can't travel here and be here at the same time. Some Scorpios may have to travel for a family incident or reason. I mean, because Pluto's in your fourth house. So a lot of Scorpios have either had a death in the family in the past 2 years, or, they're facing some transformation in their family. So some Scorpios may have to travel. I'm not saying it's every Scorpio, but also Venus is conjunct Saturn in your fifth, which I think is wonderful. You could form a lifelong relationship with someone that kind of carries on that romantic passion and flame. I actually really like that. The Venus Saturn conjunction could be the birth of a really promising creative project. Like maybe you're collaborating with someone on a creative project or on a musical piece of work or art or media project. A lot of Scorpios are going to have some luck here, I think, or just promising things come up with their creativity. A lot of Scorpios are going to, even on this full moon, really realize that there's some momentum happening in their media life, their publishing life, their creative projects, or their romantic life. Other Scorpios might decide to end a relationship at this time, or they will, I don't know, travel for somebody that they are romantically attached to. A lot of you will travel maybe to consider investing in property even, or something like that, or to discuss some kind of transformation within the family. And then we have the Aquarius new moon, January 29th, in your fourth house of home, property, family. So the new moon in Aquarius is potentially Scorpios moving into a new home, establishing a new energetic tone in their families, or conceiving of their family differently, realizing that they're going to become a parent, maybe. Again, grappling with financial transfers within the family, potentially with Jupiter stationing direct a few days later in the eighth house, maybe receiving an inheritance, or discussing financial transfers within the family. But a lot of Scorpios are looking into property. So even if you're just perusing Zillow at that time, I still think that this new moon applies to you in that way. And the chart ruler, Uranus, is stationing direct in the seventh house. And again, I'm not saying every Scorpio is receiving an inheritance this day or something, but a lot of Scorpios are discussing the financial the financial inner workings of their family, or as they share property with a partner. The chart ruler Uranus is stationing direct, like I said. This could precipitate the reinvention of a relationship or a partnership. You could form a very surprising relationship or partnership through social media or the internet. It could be a very creative, sort of outside the box partnership, could be coming from out of nowhere. Mars squares Chiron, so you are adopting new perspectives about health. Now the Cancer full moon for Sagittarius is happening on Jan 13. This is occupying your eighth house. So Sagittarius, the Cancer full moon, Jan 13 is, really frustrating time when it comes to trying to manage the subconscious. I mean, you might be triggered by something subconsciously without knowing why. It could just be like a very emotional release. Some of you will realize that you want to take a different approach to intimacy. Some of you may be struggling with intimacy with your partner with Mars retrograde in the eighth. And so you will try to find a different way to achieve intimacy again with your partner. Others will realize that they've been screwed over financially and they will have to argue with someone over that. Or they will, yeah, they will be arguing within the family about possessions, shared possessions, maybe an inheritance or maybe shared assets. Some Sagittariuses will be just like sorting through possessions, whether it's with a marriage partner or a family member. Oh, I'll keep this, you take that kind of thing. The Saturn Venus conjunction is happening in your fourth house. A lot of Sagittarius in 2025 are relocating or making a huge sacrifice on behalf of their family. And so, you are starting to think about the consequences of investing maybe in different properties, or buying, selling certain possessions that go inside the home. But yeah, I mean, this full moon is a time where you want to really dig into you want to arrive at a full understanding of why certain things trigger you at the subconscious level. Really get to just dig into the roots of your psyche in a way. And then we have the Aquarius new moon, Jan 29 in your third house. This could be the initiation of a new writing project, communication project. You could just have a significant conversation. You could learn of something very powerful. You could have a very serious financial discussion with Mercury conjunct Pluto about selling something or a transaction or a contract. You could find out some kind of plutonic news about, I don't know, something kind of serious. Um, you could get a new car, a new mode of transportation at this time. You could initiate a new writing project, communications project, a new podcast, a new newsletter. You could create a new type of content on your social media page. I mean, so again, it can be very exciting in a way. It doesn't have to be like totally daunting. You could establish a new dynamic with a sibling or a neighbor. Again, you could adopt a new mode of transportation. Mars is squaring Chiron. So you could be having some really tense discussions about possessions, assets with one of your children or something. Um, or, you might be discussing the financial contract or the financials associated with a creative project. But remember, if you're a Sag and you're under any duress at this time, go to your fifth house. Chiron is showing you that creativity is healing for you. So now we go to January 13th. The Cancer full moon for Capricorns is in the seventh house of partnership. This is a full moon where you're going to want to manage stress and conflict within a relationship. A lot of Capricorns here are going to break up with somebody. Not saying you have to or you will, but statistically, a lot of Capricorns will. You might decide to just cut off a connection with someone or just to establish better boundaries with a partner, to just like express your grievances with a partner in order to better and improve the quality of the relationship in a way, especially with Mercury in your first house, fairly articulate at this time. Venus and Saturn are conjunct in the third, so potentially you are making some serious investment decisions about an educational pathway or writing communications project. Some of you might be, I don't know, you might be struggling a little bit to connect with a sibling, or maybe you are reconnecting with a sibling and forming a longer term, more stable connection with them and stabilizing that connection. But I really think that the headline story here for Capricorns is very obvious. It's like you are having to manage stress in your significant relationships and to negotiate things. And Chiron is in the fourth, recently direct. Maybe some of you, like Cancer risings, are navigating health crises within the family or managing them. Now we go to, and I'm not saying Capricorns are breaking up. All of them are breaking up. A lot of you are just asserting and establishing, more effective boundaries with a partner. And the partner is like, thank God you finally spoke out about this. The Aquarius new moon is January 29th in your second house of possessions, personal possessions, resources, natural talents, and self-worth. So for Caps, this is the beginning maybe of a new job, a new salary. Maybe you're buying something, making a big purchase, acquiring a new possession, adopting new values, transforming your values. And this is a new moon previously you had a Cap new moon at the end of December without Pluto being in Cap for the first time in a long time, during a Capricorn new moon. So I think that you have, during the Capricorn new moon, established a new sense of self, which is allowing you maybe to break up with people who don't want it to be around anymore during the Cancer full moon. And now by the Aquarius new moon, you're like, I'm stepping into a new self-worth, maybe a new job. Maybe part of my embrace of my self-worth is accompanied by a full-scale realization of what my natural talents are. And so you can hook into your natural talents, appreciate them, and thereby fully champion your self-worth. Mars is retrograde in the seventh, so you are encountering open enemies in a lot of ways. And open enemies, you're resolving conflicts with them, hopefully. But with Mars retrograde in the seventh, you are having to, again, navigate some arguments with significant partners and friends. Squaring Chiron, maybe there's some strife in the family. But I think you can manage that just fine by, using this Mars retrograde to be more decisive about how you manage conflict. Now we go to Aquarius. The Cancer full moon is in your sixth house. A very bizarre place for a full moon conjunct to Mars retrograde. If any sign was to become exhausted and burn out during this time, it would be you. So now that you're watching this video, you can avoid that. Don't overstress yourself at work or at the gym. Really pay attention to your body. This is somatic. This is, really you're tuning into your body and what your body needs. And, during this full moon, you can release any aspects of your lifestyle that no longer serve you. You might be able to hopefully set better boundaries at work with coworkers so that you're not overtaxed at work. I mean, overstressed. You're not doing too much. And you find a different way to strengthen the body. Saturn and Venus are closely conjunct pretty much in your second house of money. So some of you are realizing that maybe the job you have right now is like too much work for too little salary. And so you're realizing I want to strive for a higher salary. Maybe some of you are starting to agree to a new job, kind of on background at that time and still in the process of giving your 2 weeks notice, maybe. And maybe on this full moon, you are moving on from a certain work project. But I do think a lot of you are realizing that your strength training, I think a lot of Aquariuses are trying to strengthen their bodies, and you're realizing that you have to take a different approach to doing that and mastering your health. And so we go now to the Aquarius new moon, Jan 29. Obviously, this is significant for you because it's in your first house or it's in your sun sign or your moon sign. So a new moon in Aquarius here is a redefinition of self. It is an establishment of self. It is a new you, maybe it's the initiation of a new transformation journey with Pluto in Aquarius, with Mercury Pluto conjunct. You could transform your whole mindset about things. You could tap into a psychic sense around this new moon, around the time of this new moon. You could also just decide with Uranus stationing direct in your fourth, some of you might decide to move, but really this is the initiation of anything new for you, a new you, new relationship, new job, new mode of expression, new identity. So yeah, I think it is, I think, positive. It's just that the Mars retrograde in the sixth can enervate you and exhaust you in a way. But I think that the Aquarius new moon with the Mercury Pluto conjunction is really having some in-depth conversations and thoughts and helping you really dig into, your psyche, really, and understand like what your transformation journey needs to look like in the coming years. But really, with the North Node in the second, and I talk about this in my 2025 horoscopes, I mean, this is really a year where you are embracing your natural talents in a different way, though. But yeah, some Aquariuses might relocate or move or reinvent some kind of dynamic in their family during this time. And then finally, we go to Pisces. So Pisces, the Cancer new moon, could give you a different way to manage conflict within your creative projects. If you're working with anyone, if you have children, you might be managing some conflict with them, or if you're recently divorced or something, discussing maybe custody. But a lot of you, I think, are realizing that you have to invest in your creativity in a way to nurture yourself. But with the full moon, completing something, you could be completing a creative project or endeavor. Some of you might go on a date. That's a little frustrating. But ultimately, I think you're validating the fact that you do have to invest in your creative hobbies to nurture yourself. And you also have to be more decisive about what kind of creative projects you're trying to pursue, maybe who you're trying to date as well, or whom you're trying to date. And again, you may have to navigate some conflict with your family or your. I think with Jupiter retrograde in your fourth, you have too much going on right now at the home or with your family. Venus and Saturn, though, are conjunct in the first house there. So I do think some Pisces are really feeling the pressure to commit to someone long term. Like some of you might end a situationship at this time and decide to shift towards a relationship that is a little bit more promising in the long term. Other Pisces are investing in long-term creative projects, and whether that's music or media or film or anything else there. And yeah, I think that in a lot of ways, this is a promising time, though, for Pisces, even though the full moon is, for everyone here, is creating a little bit of agitation. I think the Venus transit through Pisces is making you more creative, relatable, and so on. And then we have the Jan 29 Aquarius new moon for Pisces in the 12th house. So the 12th house new moon in Aquarius with the Mercury Pluto conjunction is very psychic, very connected to the spirit guides, very meditative. This is a great new moon for you to adopt or just adopt new spiritual practices. Get in touch with your psychic side. Get in touch with your spirit guides to take a more novel approach to mindfulness tactics. You probably will have very intense dreams at this time. And the chart ruler Uranus is stationing direct the next day in your third house. So you could take up a totally new media project or writing project. Maybe you're starting a podcast or a newsletter. You're just trying to do something different in the communications department in how you relate with people through your communication, and you're trying to tell a different story. And so with the new moon also in the 12th, you may be reconnecting with people from past lives, and just going behind the scenes a little bit and recuperating and restoring yourself. With Mars retrograde in the 5th, squaring Chiron in the 2nd, you may be clashing with some people that you're creating things with, or you may be clashing with people in your family over your values or your creative projects or something. But, with Venus conjunct Neptune in the 1st, it still could be a very blissful time for you as a Pisces. And hyper creative time, a time where you're getting into fashion or you're applying a different approach to your fashion, and just generating a lot of new creative ideas. So yeah, so again, this was an abridged horoscope section, which will always be the case on my YouTube videos going forward, because I have already provided all the insights that you could ever ask for with every new and full moon for 2025 in my 2025 horoscopes. Now, last year and the year before, I had annual horoscope videos, but I didn't decide to shorten my horoscopes on YouTube. Why is that? Because the 2025 horoscopes are professionally produced. They come with visuals for every new and full moon. These are all things I did not do in the previous 2 years. High quality visuals, like it's all high def. And they're very extensive. I mean, 75 to 90 minutes per sign. So there's really no reason for me to regurgitate that. I've already made these videos available on my website. I really do appreciate everyone who's downloaded one of them so far. So thank you so much and take care.